Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk about the League of Legends fandom, which I know is a bit of a weird subject for me to talk about. This is sort of an extension of what I was talking about last weekend with the whole of Men and Monsters post that Riot put out, and kind of how I was saying that's sort of a disappointing way of looking at character design, and it sort of got me thinking, and more than just me, a lot of the community as well, thinking about the sort of role in fandom in sort of this modern day media environment that we live in, but also with regard to how it has a positive effect on especially things like League of Legends, and how League of Legends fandom is not where I think a lot of people believe it should be. There was a tweet by none other than TB Skyen about how League of Legends doesn't have nearly as robust of a fandom as other similar titles like Overwatch, despite being much older. He specifically calls out that League of Legends has around 6,000 pieces of fanfiction written on Archive of Our Own, which is a fanfiction hosting website, versus about 13,000 that Overwatch has, despite the fact that Overwatch is, I want to say, like half League of Legends' age. And this discrepancy is kind of crazy when you think about it, right? League of Legends is literally like twice Overwatch's age. It's been around a lot longer. It had, I think, a lot less competition when it came out. Overwatch, for example, had to compete with League of Legends when it came out for sort of a fandom spot. So essentially, what gives, right? Sort of why is this the situation, and why a lot of people have been talking about, why the fandom in League of Legends in particular has not been where we've all wanted it to be. And for those of you who are not on the board of fandom and maybe even think it's, not a good thing, let me sort of explain the advantages of having a robust fandom behind whatever it is you're enjoying most of. It could be a TV show, a book, a video game, a movie, what have you, right? These are people who are essentially interested in this concept, not just because of the thing you produced, right? People weren't just interested in the original Star Wars because of the story it told, right? It was a hero's journey story. Obviously, it was one of the first movies to do it, and now every movie these days does it, but that's sort of a different topic for not this channel, so... But either way, people were interested in the world of Star Wars, the universe, the characters. What did they get up to? What were they doing in between movies? What are they like? What was the life they had before these adventures happened? What are these other background characters? I want to know more about them. What are these other background machines that I'm seeing, or background environments? All these things that people have questions about and get excited about and get interested in, and therefore create content about it, their own content, whether that's art, whether that's music, whether that's writing something, whether that's even things like fan games, right? All of this kind of is the basis of fandom. And for those of you who are saying, okay, yeah, sure, that's great that it exists, why does it matter? Well, consider the fact that if Star Wars did not have a very robust fandom behind it, we likely would not have gotten the prequel movies or the sequel movies afterwards, because there wouldn't have been that interest, right? And even if you think about some lesser-known examples, Tron, which was released back in the 1980s, had a cult following because the movie itself was not very good, but people overwhelmingly were interested in the world and the characters and the sort of existence that the movie had, so much that eventually it did get a sequel. I want to say like 20 years later, not even, like 30 years later, it got a sequel. Conversely, Avatar, yes, that Avatar, did not get a sequel. It is, but that's, again, a different subject for another time, because despite the fact that it was one of the highest grossing movies of all time, no one was interested in the world it had. No one was interested in the story or the characters. No one can even name the names of the main characters in that movie nowadays because of how little an effect it had on people, right? And so that's sort of the difference between having a good fandom and not having one, right? If you have a fandom, the odds of your chosen media getting sequels or getting more content created for it or having a longer lifespan is significantly higher, right? If Star Trek, for example, didn't have a good fandom, then it likely would have been dead by now. But because it survived so many reboots and bad movies and bad shows, because of the fact that there is a community that's dedicated to it that wants to see it succeed. And League of Legends, I would say, had a fandom. It still kind of sort of has one. But the biggest thing is that Riot have not done things to help create it and help make it grow. The biggest thing a fandom needs is we need to know sort of what the universe is like. The more information you can give us, the better. There needs to be some gaps for people to be able to fill those in, but generally speaking, we need to know what the state of the universe is, right? And the biggest thing that Riot did is back in, I want to say, Season 5, they essentially retconned the League of Legends and the Institute of War out of the game universe of League of Legends. And this was a huge deal because it meant that no longer were fans sort of aware of what the world looked like or where their favorite characters were at or what they were doing, because all of a sudden, knowing that the Institute of War is gone, it's easy to tell where some characters might have ended up, right? Garen was a soldier before the Institute of War, so he'd probably still be doing that if the League of Legends had never existed. But other characters, such as Fiddlesticks and Jax, whose stories literally involve the Institute of War, just sort of disappeared. If that was your favorite character, well, he essentially isn't canon now in the universe. And because it took so long for Riot to create the universe that we know and love today, essentially a lot of the fandom kind of died off because it just took too long, and there were too many questions being asked and too many retcons happening and continually having to revise your idea of what a character looks like, and eventually people just kind of give up on it. And while Riot have a fairly established universe nowadays, the damage has already kind of been done because League of Legends is, I would say, past its most popular period of time, which is probably in that sort of Season 3 to Season 6-ish window, where I would say most people were getting involved with the game and playing it and sort of sharing it with their friends before a lot of competition had sort of sprung up. And nowadays, the biggest thing that's sort of limiting the involvement in fandom and the involvement community, and this is where we get back to the Monsters and Men post, is that Riot do not actually see their characters or their universe as characters or a universe that exists for their own reasons and their own benefit. They see it specifically as vessels for video game mechanics or for a video game basically interactions. And while this is not necessarily a bad thing from a design perspective, it does limit the amount that you can actually interact with and get involved with the universe that Riot have created, right? If you have a favorite character, let's say, for example, your favorite character is Zac, well, Zac hasn't had any lore written about him, or he's been in any stories since, I want to say, like 2017, 2018 maybe at the latest. So you just don't have a sense for where this character is at or what he's doing, or even is he still in the game, right? He's not interacting with any characters we know about. He's not doing anything on his own. We don't really have a sense for what his motivations are, because outside of the couple little blurbs of story that we've gotten about Zac, it's been dead silent since then. And that's because Riot don't care about narrative until it relies on something that they're actually currently pushing, right? A new skin release, or a new champion release, or, for example, we got a Renekton story recently, but that coincided with the release of the Emperors of the Ascended expansion in Legends of Runeterra, right? They specifically, and they've said this, they've come out and said their narrative team basically doesn't write anything unless they're tying it into something that another team is doing. The narrative team does not produce content for content's sake. They are essentially not allowed to write stories for the sake of stories being told. The only time they get to actually do something is if essentially Riot say, oh, we have this new champion coming out or something along those lines, and we want you guys to publish something. Very rarely do they get to do things for their own benefit. Generally speaking, that is not the case. And that, I think you guys can all tell, is a pretty disappointing thing to hear, moving forward. It's one of the biggest reasons why this sort of fandom has not sprung up, because there isn't the opportunity for anyone to do anything for it. If the narrative team is literally not allowed to write stories for story's sake, even the fact that we're getting a Leona and Diana story this June is exclusively because Riot is trying to draw attention to Pride Month, right? They're able to package it together very nice and neatly. And while I don't expect Riot to sort of give us a character's entire life story upon their release, it is pretty disappointing when they create a unique character that you're really excited about, and then you want to see them do things and interact with people and do more, and then that character, nothing ever happens with them. Riot have been a little bit better nowadays about actually doing things like developing their story. Currently, I think they have done a good job of sort of saying, Noxious versus Ionia Part 2 is coming up, and there's been some commotion in Demacia, and even Misfortune supplanting Gangplank as the supreme ruler of Bilgewater, right, which is a thing that happened a couple of years ago. That's all good development, but it's too little is the problem. There's not enough to sort of build up that interest again. And while the start of this year, where they said, Viego, boom, Ruined King, we're creating a character for a story reason, here he is, and we're going to try and have all these characters that were released throughout the year tell more of his story. The problem is none of these characters are actually telling anything about the story. We don't have a sense for what has happened in the story since the opening cutscene they gave us at the start of the season, where we had Lucian and Senna square off against the Ruined King. We don't know how Gwen factors into it. We don't know how the Yordle's going to factor into it. We can guess how the Sentinel will, but unless Riot actually give us a story where the Sentinel, for example, meets Lucian and Senna, or where he meets Poppy and Vayne, who are sort of on that track at the end of the cinematic, if we don't have anything written or created that tells us that, then that story essentially will have gone nowhere, and Riot will have succeeded in creating yet another plot thread that never gets resolved, which they're very, very good at. We have a lot of those right now. And I would say that because of this sort of overemphasis on mechanics to the expense of everything else, it's just a mistake, in my opinion, because it's prohibiting the creation of a robust fandom, and it does mean that, for example, if League of Legends were to go under, you would have very few people who would care that it's gone, right? Obviously, there are some, but very few people would actually want to sort of pass the torch. And this doesn't work out from even a business perspective if you consider the fact that, you know, if League of Legends were to go under, if you have a good fandom and you have a lot of people who are interested in the story and the universe that you've created, you may have a lot of those players go to Legends of Runeterra, for example, if that's still intact, because, yeah, I can't play League of Legends anymore, so I can't use that to interact with the universe, but what I can do is I can play Legends of Runeterra, which is sort of not quite the same. I don't like card games, but it's my only way to interact with the universe, right? So you can kind of see where that helps these sorts of things stay alive for longer. So it's just sort of a disappointment to hear that that's kind of where Riot are at with their development. And it's sort of the thing where I wanted to make this video because I'm really hoping people understand how important this is and why this matters going forward and why Riot should be putting more of more attention to it than they currently are. So, but anyways, those are just all kind of my opinions, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I would love to hear your thoughts, especially if you completely disagree with everything I just said. Please let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear about it. Or if this has resonated with you guys, let me know as well, especially if you want to see more content that focuses sort of on the lore and the fan side of things. I'd love to hear about it. I love talking about it, if you guys couldn't tell. So if you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.